Looking for a great place to find a wide selection of clothes, rockabilly, steampunk, corsets, goth, and all the accessories to go with it? Check out Subculture Corsets at the Avenues Mall in Jacksonville, Florida. Or check out their website at subculturecorsets.com. And if you enter the code Cosmic Shenanigans, you'll save 10% at checkout. See you there.
Welcome to Shenanigans Ensue with
Mary SanGiovanni!
Hi folks, welcome to Cosmic Shenanigans. I'm Mary SanGiovanni and I'm very excited to be talking with you about cosmic horror once again in all its glorious forms. Today we are going to talk about the HORLA, which is a short story by Guy de Maupassant. I hope I pronounced that right. And he's one of those guys that in English class that you see the name all the time, but you don't always necessarily know how to pronounce correctly, so I hope I'm saying that right. Before I start, though, I would like to relay to you a message about a friend of mine, Christine Morgan. She is a noted author and editor, and as she puts it, a fan fiction hack, and she needs our help. If you're part of the horror or bizarro scenes, you've probably been touched by her kindness, her generosity, her sincerity. You might have even been lucky enough to sample her baking or have one of her amazing dolls gifted to you. I actually do. I have a Silent Hill one. Christine has devoted countless hours not only to writing her own fiction, but to editing the fantastic Fossil Lake anthology series, reviewing books for the Horror Fiction Review, attending meetings and gatherings of all kinds, and supporting the scene with everything she's got. Now, Christine needs us to help her. Christine's been fighting a battle with that fuck known as cancer. As everyone knows, cancer fucking sucks. And it really does. It genuinely, truly does. And Christine has managed to keep a bright disposition. She's funny. She's, lovable with her updates. And along with the general suck of just dealing with your own body turning on you comes the suck of ridiculous medical bills, on top of being unable to work due to the toll that cancer and its treatment take on you mentally and physically. And, on top of this, we're writers. We don't have health insurance, generally speaking. So if you can spare anything, no amount is too small, please consider donating to Christine's GoFundMe at www.gofundme.com/Christine-Morgan. And if you can't afford to donate, please help by spreading the word. Thank you in advance. So if you're out there and you can afford to donate some money, please do, because Christine is awesome, and I'm all for giving her all the help she needs. Now, to get into our topic about the HORLA, I know that I had mentioned, I believe it was the last show, that I was going to be comparing old short stories and classical works of cosmic horror, or works that essentially are in the vein leading to cosmic horror, with new works. Now, I was sick last week, which is one of the reasons why this show is late, but I did manage to read the HORLA, and I basically explore the cosmic horror aspects of that particular short story. I don't have a modern writer to compare it to this time. Hopefully in the future I can do that. But I think that talking about this particular story and hitting some of the classics that maybe people don't necessarily consider cosmic horror or haven't really thought of in that vein, I think it's worth noting. It's worth looking into these kinds of short stories, even if we don't have a modern cosmic horror story to compare them to. I do have some comparisons to Lovecraft, though, which I think are relevant in sort of understanding the genre. The HORLA by Guy de Maupassant, that's my super sexy French accent, was published in 1887 after a much shorter version appeared in the newspaper Gil Blas. I don't know what that means in French. I took 4 years of French in a semester in college. I have no idea what that means, actually, but we will be getting to what the HORLA means, because that is related to French. It was published, the shorter version was published October 26th, 1886. This was published a year later. He made it into a longer story. Although it doesn't check every box that traditional cosmic horror is defined by, at least in my opinion, it does check enough that it is worthy of examination as a tale both influential to and exhibiting features of cosmic horror. And I'll explain what I mean. As H.P. Lovecraft explains it in his essay, Supernatural Horror in Literature, 1927, that essay we actually may have to look at in a future episode in depth, because that essay comes up a lot. Relating the advent in France of an invisible being who lives on water and milk, sways the minds of others, and seems to be the vanguard of a horde of extraterrestrial organisms arrived on Earth to subjugate and overwhelm mankind, this tense narrative is perhaps without peer in its particular department. So Lovecraft was of the belief that this short story was most definitely cosmic horror. And actually, as we'll talk about later, was particularly influential to Lovecraft. The term HORLA is not a real word. It's a combination, people believe, of two French words, hor meaning outside, and la meaning there. Thus, the word HORLA essentially means outsider, or one from out there, which is very much a cosmic horror kind of monster. Okay, so the title itself already suggests a certain connection to cosmic horror, that the HORLA is a being from out there. Okay, the story has been cited as an influence on the Call of Cthulhu, which is one of arguably Lovecraft's most notable short stories, and also features an outside extraterrestrial entity that uses mind control with the intent of conquering the planet. While the characters in Call of Cthulhu tend to go looking for information, which is an attribute of cosmic horror, I think, however small a piece of the puzzle that they uncover, they tend to go looking for it. The narrator in the HORLA seems only to want to run away from it, which is almost contradictory to a cosmic horror story. But there are other elements, I think, which make it fall sort of squarely into that subgenre. They do try to get away from what's going on, but there's still an aspect of trying to face the thing head on and learn what's going on eventually. Okay? Basically, the narrator in the HORLA comes by pieces of the puzzle almost accidentally, and that is similar to Call of Cthulhu, where and also something like, say, the Great God Pan, where the whole story isn't revealed at once. You get little pieces of it, little pieces that this person knows, little pieces that person knows, and it gets all put together into this sort of cosmic scope. In this particular case, in the HORLA, that cosmic scope is telescoped down a little bit, but its worldwide implications, at first they're only a feeling that the narrator has, but later on, based on certain similar events in Brazil, we do see, as readers, that there is a sort of broader scope to this monster and to the effect that this monster has on people. The desperate and failed attempt at stopping the monster, though, spoiler alert, is certainly present, from the extreme measures he takes in trying to free himself from its grip to his ultimate conclusion, which one can debate is either reason or madness telling him he was unsuccessful. Okay? And we're going to come back to the element of madness here, because that is kind of important. While there's no overt presence of the occult here, another aspect that we've talked about in cosmic horror is that there's almost always some element of the occult, some aspect of the occult. There's no overt presence of the occult in the HORLA, and no one character deliberately summons the HORLA for any particular purpose. But there are two quotes from the stories which suggest a kind of cosmic horror framework working in the background, and I believe that these are relevant. The first is, ever since man has thought, since he has been able to express and write down his thoughts, he has felt himself close to a mystery which is impenetrable to his coarse and imperfect senses, and he endeavors to supplement the feeble penetration of his organs by the efforts of his intellect. So essentially, what I think this is saying here is that because we are thinking creatures, we are aware that there is a sense of mystery to the universe, that there is this greater and yet to be understood aspect to existence. And that because we are not maybe mentally or physically built to understand it outright, it still doesn't stop us from trying to understand this on some deeper level. That it still almost propels us to try to find words to explain it. And this is true. I mean, if you look at human history, we have mythology and religion in a lot of ways to account for things that we didn't understand scientifically. And then, of course, once we understand them scientifically, these frameworks are revised and they evolve over time. This concept is present in the HORLA, and to degrees it's present in cosmic horror works as well. This idea that even if we're not actively searching for something, our mind needs to put a framework around the things that we don't understand. We give it words, okay? We give it ideas. And that is most definitely present in the HORLA because the narrator is trying to understand what is happening to him, what this creature is, if even a creature at all. The story works with several concepts to which this is relevant. It suggests that mystery is all around us, particularly mysteries of forces greater and more powerful than us, and that we seek to understand and thus explain them one way or another. Firstly, the narrator has a discussion with a doctor who specializes in nervous disorders and has more recently begun study in the effects of mesmerism, which was an emerging field of fascination at the time. In the late 1800s, mesmerism and seances and this whole idea of spiritual world and the powers of the mind, it was a popular pastime, really. It was a popular topic of conversation. It was given about as much weight as seances, which is to say more than they are now. But here's the interesting thing. In their discussion, they talk about how such things as ghosts, gnomes, genies, fairies, etc. were the names that were given to forces that we don't understand. All of these specifically, if you'll note, are creatures with some degree of ability to control others or to control minds. Okay? And while so much of what we have considered supernatural is simply science yet to be fully understood, mesmerism seems to tap into a real and physiological power bordering on the supernatural. Right, later on, a conversation the narrator has with a priest in the story seems almost contradictory. That while we discount as unreal so much that we cannot see or prove, forces like wind are very real and very powerful, and we can't see wind. So it's not really as contradictory as at first it seems. Basically what we're saying is that what the story is saying is that there are forces out there that we can't see, that we can't prove are real, but that we are aware on some level exist. And because we know they exist, we need to give them name. We need to give them form. And that's what happens in the HORLA. Again, the only real difference here to cosmic horror is that, generally speaking, the characters in cosmic horror go looking for this kind of thing. Whereas in this story, much like the older weird fiction ghost story kinds of things, these things happen to the narrator. Okay. There's an underlying sentiment which arguably Lovecraft later applied to his work, that extraterrestrial forces have abilities which science may someday reclassify from supernatural to natural, but which appear to us, for all intents and purposes, as magical, since they can use such things to overpower us. Okay? So, as opposed to maybe aliens, we have ghosts, gnomes, genies, fairies, aliens, all of these beings which are from some other place, another dimension, another world, which have abilities which we cannot fully explain, but which we need to understand because of their influence over us. There's no active pursuit of knowledge here, as I mentioned, in the HORLA. No attempt to summon the HORLA, any more than Lovecraft's gardener and his family wanted to summon the color out of space to their farm. So again, it's not always an element in Lovecraft stuff, that element of pursuit. But rather there's a slow unraveling of a presence which encroaches daily more and more on the placid, serene, naive life of the narrator, and that opens vistas of horrible thought. Okay? That brings us to the second quote, which I think is relevant in this particular case, which is, "One might say that man, ever since he has thought, has had a foreboding and a fear of a new being, stronger than himself, his successor in this world, and that, feeling him near and not being able to foretell the nature of the unseen one, he has, in his terror, created the whole race of hidden beings, vague phantoms born of fear." Again, it just goes to reinforce the idea that we feel things. We feel this other world, this other supernatural world. Now, Lovecraft in his later works moved away from making his gods and monsters supernatural per se, which is, I think, one of the reasons why people tend to consider his work maybe closer to science fantasy or even science fiction than just straight up fantasy. He tried to give it a framework of realism, of biological realism, because Lovecraft was a realist. He did not believe in the supernatural here. But in his work, in so much of his work, despite his personal opinions, there is that other world, that other dimension, that other planet, the places beyond the planets. And it's that otherness, that otherworldliness that is pervasive throughout the HORLA. It's pervasive throughout cosmic horror. There is an intermingling of madness and the supernatural here, just as there is with a lot of Lovecraft's work. The narrator takes great pains to reason himself out of believing he's simply insane. And the news article he reads toward the end of the tale suggests that his experience is not unique. All right? The aspect of madness, I think, stems all the way back to Poe. Poe's work was heavily influenced by the horror of losing one's grip on oneself, on the mental faculties that we rely on to frame the world and frame our experience in it. And actually, it's funny, in a recent interview I did, I was asked about women in horror and why women's perspective on horror is unique and different than men's. And I've answered this question countless times before, but one of the things that occurred to me as I was answering this particular interview question was that what it comes down to is that so much of horror for men deals with losing that sense of responsibility, of being unable to protect, unable to defend. Whereas women tend to think that we're already behind the 8 ball in that regard. Like men, one of the horrors is coming against something that is an even match or stronger. That in and of itself is a potential horror because it means that they can't fulfill the duty they feel to protect their loved ones. Women already assume that many enemies, for lack of a better word, that we're going to come up against are physically stronger than us. Half the population is physically stronger than us. And so it skews, I think, what we're actually afraid of then. What we're afraid of then becomes more, because we can't physically outmaneuver you being the enemy, you being the monster, not you readers, because I'm sure you're all delightful people. But if we can't physically outmaneuver the threat, then we need to mentally outwit it. And that's something that goes back to fairy tales. If you read Grimm's fairy tales, those heroines almost always survive on the basis of their wits, on the basis of their ability to outthink and outmaneuver. And that spans countries. The Arabian Nights, the Tales of the Arabian Nights, is the framework of those stories is based on that. Fairy tales is based on that. A lot of women's horror, you'll notice, is based on that. A lot of horror that is female-centric in some way, that shows a female heroine, or is from a female point of view, shows the idea of relying on that particular quality that we have. Now, that outthinking quality is based on, too, it is strongly influenced and intermingled and entwined with our emotions. We use our emotions as much to make decisions as we use our intellect. We trust that. We trust our instincts, our gut instincts. And for a story about madness, a story that would render our ability to outwit, outthink, or be unable to trust the emotions that we rely on to protect us and to keep us and our loved ones safe, that's pretty terrifying. Okay? Now, as I mentioned, Poe has madness. He mentions madness in his stories. Cosmic horror, because Poe was an influence on Lovecraft. A lot of Lovecraft stories, the information that they get, the pursuit of that information often ends up with the character going mad from the revelation that this pursuit of information causes. In the HORLA, there's a similar aspect of whether or not the situation is a case of the supernatural or of madness, and whether or not there really is a distinct enough line between the two to matter. If you believe something is there, whether it's there or not, it still affects you the same way. And the issue with madness or the supernatural here is that both of them can cause an extreme reaction, an extreme measures to be taken to solve this problem, to get around this obstacle or get out of this situation. And sometimes, whether it's the supernatural aspect or the aspect of madness or both, sometimes misjudging which it is leads to the fact that aspect doesn't work, that desperate measure is a complete failure. And that is the case here with the HORLA. Okay, his means of stopping this from happening fails miserably. So ultimately, I think there's enough here to show an influence on cosmic horror, even if it doesn't fit squarely into the label from a traditional standpoint. Okay, there is that sense of the other, that foreign entity that is potentially much broader in scope and may portend a horror as yet to happen to humanity, that now that the narrator is aware of this, it has irrevocably changed his personality. It has irrevocably changed his life. That is very much a cosmic horror framework. And from that standpoint, I think the HORLA does fit into it pretty neatly. It does have elements of impending dread of an outside force. As I mentioned, the implication that force is of a larger scale than at first believed. And there's an obvious influence on Lovecraft's work. So I think it is a suitable contribution to the fiction, which does eventually become cosmic horror. Now, that's pretty much all I have to say on this particular story. I would like to mention that the next show I'm shooting for, and I think fans of Silent Hill who are fans like me, who are like uber geek fans, will be excited to know that we're going to tackle Silent Hill and its cosmic horror implications, because I cannot in good conscience continue the show if I do not talk about one of the greatest video games ever created of all time. So we're going to talk about the cosmic horror influence on Silent Hill, and probably we'll be tackling the first 4 games. The first 5 games, because we'll probably include the Origins game as well. And we will be looking at how the cult and the religious aspects of the cosmic horror, actually religious aspects of Silent Hill, as difficult as it seems to be for people outside who don't understand it, there is actually a framework, a religious framework, which sort of ties everything together. So we talk about that next time. I do want to remind folks again, before I go, that if you are a fan of author, editor, and fan fiction hack Christine Morgan, that you might want to consider helping her out here. She needs our help. If you're part of the horror bizarro scenes, you've probably been touched by her kindness, her generosity, her sincerity. Maybe you've had her baking. Maybe you've received one of her awesome dolls that she makes. She's really very talented. She's devoted countless hours not only to writing her own fiction, but to editing, to reviewing, and to attending meetings and gatherings of all kinds in order to support the scene with everything that she's got, and she needs our help. She's been fighting a battle with cancer, and as everyone knows, cancer doesn't always it doesn't just suck because it's your own body turning on you. It also sucks because there are ridiculous medical bills on top of being unable to work, and the toll that cancer takes and its treatment takes on you mentally and physically. If you can spare anything, no amount is too small, please consider donating to Christine's GoFundMe at www.gofundme.com/Christine-Morgan. Christine is CHRISTINE-MORGAN. If you can't afford to donate, please help by spreading the word. Anything you can do to help Christine would be super awesome. I also want to thank Dave Thomas, who is, as always, my super awesome engineer. He's handling all the technical aspects of the show. If you want to show your appreciation, check out the @Mediator Notes channel on Twitch, where Dave plays video games and talks horror and makes snarky commentary, and maybe will even tell you about his escapades in the grocery store. Also, please check out the horror show with Brian Keene. Give that a listen. You can hear me, Dave, and Brian talking about pretty much everything related to horror in all of its glory, and sometimes in all of its less shiny aspects as well. But it's always fun. It's always a giggle. It always tugs the heartstrings. So give that a listen. If you'd like to advertise on Cosmic Shenanigans, that would be super awesome as well. Please send an email to Armand Rosamilia at ARMANDROSAMILIA. He's got a long Italian name. At gmail.com. That's Armand Rosamilia at gmail.com. You can send payment through PayPal and add copy to Armand at that same email address, and it will all float to me on the wings of butterflies. It'll be awesome. You can check out Cosmic Shenanigans on Project Entertainment Network, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, I guess, for as long as they will be in existence, iTunes, and all other platforms. Thank you for listening. I look forward to talking cosmic horror with you again next week. Goodbye.
How do people who make stuff up for a living make stuff up?
New York Times bestseller Jonathan Mayberry told us.
Oprah's book club favorite Sue Miller told us.
You sort of take a character and make some bad things happen.
How'd we get them to do that?
We colored them, just like at a cocktail party, except through your headphones.
Join us every Thursday for the Liars Club Oddcast, a slightly unhinged podcast where storytellers interview other storytellers.
Available on Project Entertainment Network, iTunes, and everywhere podcasts are heard.